So I'm Mohit Lad. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ThousandEyes, and very excited to be here in front of this really awesome geeky crowd. I can tell because nobody's looking at me, so everyone's on their laptop, and that's a sign of being geeky. In terms of the title of my talk, it's Network Intelligence Without Borders, and this is going to be a short presentation just to give you some context on what ThousandEyes is all about. And then we go into the meat of the talk, right? So that's the flow of the day. And since it's early morning, it's 8 a.m. California time. If you haven't had your coffee yet, I feel pretty confident that what we're going to show you is going to wake you up. So don't rush back. We'll show you some cool stuff. So just a little bit about ThousandEyes. We're headquartered in San Francisco, so we're fairly local. It's about an hour from this point here. We were started by Ricardo and myself. The core team had a really strong background on the network side of things, especially at internet scale networks. So we were pretty good at looking at large complex environments and making sense of these things. So that's really the founding story. We got some really strong investors behind us as well, and that constantly pushes us to improve ourselves. And then in terms of the things that I'm really happy about, and I'll talk about the problem we solve, but the things that I'm really happy about is just looking at customer adoption, people starting to use it in very interesting ways. And a lot of the use cases that we will talk about are actually driven by customers telling us what they're using it for. So that's where this gets really interesting, is we've built something which we think is more fundamental to the problems of the modern day networks. And then we'll see all kinds of interesting use cases we'll talk about. So we have a lot of Fortune companies, Fortune 500 companies using ThousandEyes. We have some of the largest banks on the platform, and also have some pretty good recognition from some of the vendors like Gartner's and the like. So that's a quick overview of ThousandEyes. But before I go into other stuff, the first thing I'd say is when you think about network troubleshooting, now we've all been through this world before. When you build something, it breaks and you're responsible for it or you're blamed for it. So when you think about network troubleshooting, this is one of the first things that comes to mind, right? Wireshark, the concept behind this being packet capture, where you're looking at things going through your tubes and trying to understand what's going on. So that's what we were accustomed to as well when we started looking at networks. And the reason this is what comes to mind first is because of these environments that these technologies were really built for. So this is an old school legacy MPLS corporate backbone environment. So you have a couple of branch offices as a representative of a complex environment and going into a corporate data center connected with MPLS links. Now what you'll notice here, the theme here is that everything just concentrates in one point. Like things are going, the apps are on-prem, so from the branch offices you concentrate onto the data centers, which is where technologies such as packet captures or net flows are useful because you can see the picture from one endpoint to another endpoint. And so when we started to think about building the company, looking at the problems, we looked at these existing techniques like net flows, packet captures, and we started to realize that some of these things that have been mainstream in the past are not actually going to help us solve some of the problems we were thinking of solving. And so I'll talk about what are those problems, right? So one of the first things you will talk about is this world has started to change with the adoption of cloud applications. So now your apps are moving out. And you guys know all these things, but I just want to visualize this. So it's not new information. Apps are starting to move out. Think about Office 365, et cetera. So now, instead of this just pure dedicated corporate MPLS environment, you would have started to see this motion from the data center out through the internet to a cloud application. But this is not the only thing, right? As cloud starts to become mainstream, people realize that split tunneling might be a better way rather than backhauling everything to the data center. So this is where you would see the branch offices now starting to go to the data centers. So that becomes more interesting. Then add to that, the offices themselves are realizing that MPLS is not probably necessary for entire connectivity end-to-end, so they're starting to go over the internet as well with DIA overlays and so on. So that looks more interesting than before. Wireless becomes mainstream, and this has been pretty common in a lot of our customers where they're just completely shutting down wired connections, and every client is on wireless, including large banks. So this is becoming another blind spot, a huge problem for performance management. And then let's not forget those remote users, those people on the road that tend to complain quite a lot. And so those add to this picture. And so this picture shows you that the environment that we're talking about today is a lot more complex than what we had 10, 15 years ago from an enterprise standpoint. The key thing you'll notice here is that it's very internet-centric, right? So everything is pretty much going through the internet. It's very internet-centric, but it's a part of the environment that you actually can't see, you can't measure directly, you can't own, you don't have any control on. And so this sort of chaotic environment is the problem space that we're trying to address as ThousandEyes. So our objective at ThousandEyes is to make you make sense of all of this mess. So I like to tell people that legacy products are built for controlled environments, and ThousandEyes is built for chaos. So that's really the philosophy of what ThousandEyes is built around. We don't assume you control the environment. So we fundamentally like a messy environment that we can make sense of. So that's the problem statement. Now, the way we decided to attack this problem, it's got a lot of different components, a lot of different moving parts there. So the way we decided to attack this problem is break it into 3 sort of phases of the company development. In the first phase, we decided to focus on an online application that is delivered over the internet. So the objective of phase 1 was to make sense of what breaks when something like Office 365 is going over the internet. And for that, we put these agents at different points in the internet, and we call them cloud agents. And the concept of a cloud agent is these are sensors that we've deployed globally. Now, by no means they capture the entire internet, right? We know all that. So these are sensors that are deployed globally, which give you a pulse of what's going on from a different part of the world than where your servers are located. So if Office 365 is slow in Japan, our cloud agent in Japan will be giving you some indication of what's going on. And the magic here doesn't lie in putting an agent in Japan. The magic here lies in what we do with that agent. So a lot of the stuff you will see in the later half of the presentation is stuff that is not trivial. So once we put an agent, we bring all our network geekiness out, and we try to do all kinds of hacks and protocol changes to make sure that we can get interesting metrics from these agents. So that's the cloud agents. And with the cloud agents, you will be able to spot issues in the public internet very easily. With this phase done a few years ago, and we showed some of this in a past NFT, we wanted to extend the visibility to inside the enterprise. So this is where we came up with the notion of enterprise agents. And fundamentally, it's the same software package, but it now goes inside the enterprise. And being inside the enterprise at a branch office or a data center, you're able to cover this hybrid environment, partly belonging to your enterprise intranet and then partly belonging to the internet. So with this enterprise agent, you can monitor connectivity between the 2 agents. You can also go from the enterprise agent up there to the cloud provider. So it gives you this spectrum of visibility from inside to outside as well as from inside to inside. So that's the enterprise agents. And in today's session, we'll be talking a lot more about the enterprise agents and all the use cases that are coming up, some of them that our customers are pointing out as well, which is really interesting. And the final missing piece here is that annoying user that's sitting at home and complaining. And so in order to complete that gap, what we've done is built this newest piece of technology called the endpoint agent. This has been a really challenging piece of technology to develop because it's extremely hard to get this particular concept right. So in the later half of the presentation, we'll talk about the endpoint agent and all the interesting metrics and insights it can provide into end user behavior. So with the endpoint agent, the picture looks pretty complete now. You've got the cloud agents which cover the internet, the public internet side pretty well. You have the enterprise agents that cover the internal and the internet side as well from the corporate standpoint. And the endpoint agent goes not only into the remote users, but also into the users that are in your corporate environment. So it can cover things like wireless issues, which is a mainstream problem as well. So that's sort of the picture from a data standpoint. But what makes this whole thing really interesting is what we do with this data. Through all these agents, the data we collect, we're centrally aggregating and processing this and correlating patterns across all these agents and data sets. And that's a concept that we call as network intelligence, because now this is not just about a point-to-point issue. This is about a broader issue that is common across a different set of users. And so the concept of network intelligence and collectively making sense of data is a key concept that we are bringing to the market that Ricardo, our CTO, will present in the last half of the session. So that's sort of the 3 main concepts from a data collection standpoint. In terms of what we do with this data. Like I wanted to put this slide out because there's a DNA in the company that you guys should be aware of as the audience, and what we care about and how we think about product design. So at the core of it is the data. We want to make sure that the data we collect is really interesting and new. And this is a key difference between ThousandEyes and some of the other products you will see is we are not using an existing data set like NetFlow or so on. We're actually trying to build a data set. And the data set we build is characterizing all the changes in the environment and what the actual environment is as it relates to your corporate environment. But outside of the data, one of the things we do is to make sure that the deployment of the data collection is really easy. And so we'll cover that in the demos as well. And then once we get the data, as I mentioned, we want to make sense of this. This is where being a SaaS company is really, really powerful because we can process all the data centrally. We can make more sense of it than a point-to-point connection, but also enable really powerful collaboration. So one of the things that I'm sure all of you have gone through is when you're troubleshooting an issue, network is a shared event. So when you're troubleshooting an issue, you're trying to send screenshots, you're trying to tell them to do a trace route, and this collaboration is really messy. So what we've made sure from day one is collaboration is central to the building of the product. And then hopefully, as you see through the rest of the presentation, a lot of focus has been put on data interaction and UI because it's really the nature of the data we work with as network experts or network field engineers. It's very spatial. It's topological. And so my belief and our belief is that you can't troubleshoot a network by looking at area charts and bar graphs and line graphs. You actually need to visualize the damn network. So that's why it's really important that we have a spatial representation of this, and that comes out in the product, as you will see through the day. So this is what rest of the day looks like. That's all I have. I just wanted to set some context on what ThousandEyes is, what do we stand for, and what is our objective. And you'll see through the rest of the day the various components we talked about, including the enterprise agents, the endpoint agents, and then a really interesting concept of internet outage detection. And what you will notice through the day is that when we are tackling a problem, we want to go as deep as possible and not be superficial.